Good afternoon, all. Let me start by saying welcome to those who are attending our webinar. I'm Nazira, co-founder and president of Vendorship Inc. It's great to have you here. Thank you to our speakers, Jenna, Mary, and Prateek for giving their expertise and experience today. A much needed topic of the time, fintech at the intersection of innovation, economy, and government. We hope that our discussion will contribute to meaningful and constructive discussion. We are happy to have with us our team, our Vendorship team, also along with all of you watching us today, Anu, Madhu, Susan, Manju, and Sabina. Thank you for joining us. And please do chat with your comments and questions. We will answer your questions towards the end. So, Jenna, you can visit the profiles of our speakers on our website, but I'll give you a brief introduction of our panelists today. Jenna is the CEO of a San Antonio-based Harlan Clark Company, a financial technology company, and she's played several executive leadership roles in the financial industry. And also, she has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Colorado. Thank you for joining us, Jenna. We have Prateek, and Prateek is all the way joining us from India, from Odisha. So thank you, Prateek, for joining us. I know there's a cyclone going on, so hopefully you're remaining safe. But Prateek is an entrepreneur, and when he saw the opportunity to get into the fintech industry, he did right? And so Prateek is also next generation, looking into next generation enterprise needs for digital transformation enablement. Thank you, Prateek. Mary, you are here in Atlanta. Thank you. You are a fintech crisis expert, and you have a decade of experience in public relations, and you are the vice president of William Mills Agency. And we would love to hear more about what does fintech crisis mean. So as we start going further in our discussion, and when you're not working, Mary, you also enjoy gardening, cooking, and traveling. So welcome again to all of you. Post your comments. There's a dialogue going on along with my team in the background. But let me ask the panelists, what is that one thing or one skill that you've learned during this lockdown? Mary, do you want to start?
Sure. I think from my perspective, one of the biggest things that I've learned is navigating through all this digital world. I am on back-to-back calls every day now, it seems like, through Zoom and through Teams, and it's really just leveraging the technologies that we have and actually putting it to use. We've had this technology for quite a few years now, but I think it's definitely taken hold, and it's been a learning experience, and it's been something to definitely get a handle on.
Okay, very nice. How about you, Jenna?
I would say that exactly what we're doing right now, this is a time for learning. I don't suspect the world we will see after COVID-19 will be the same. And to navigate those as leaders and as innovators, I think we need to be still and be silent and let learning really absorb. So things like this, where we can just take in information and think about what it means to us personally and what it means to our companies. We've got to chart new courses, and to me, it's being still and letting that learning really take hold so I can lead my best.
Okay, sounds good. How about you, Prateek? What is the one skill that you've learned during this lockdown period?
Yeah. Firstly, namaskar and a very good evening to everyone. And thanks, Nazira, for inviting me to this webinar. This is Prateek Agarwal. I represent as the co-founder of Beta Technologies. We are a small startup from Odisha, India. And during this lockdown, especially I would like to quote a simple line which I learned from the founder of Oyo, Ritesh Agarwal. He mentioned very rightly, he said, when fishermen are not allowed to fish, they start mending their nets. So this is the time to mend our nets and get through this and come with a bang.
Very nice, very well said, indeed, Prateek Agarwal. And I would never have thought that I'll be talking about finances as well. But as the time needs, we change ourselves and learn a lot more, right? So, Jenna, let's go to our core topic today about financial technology. we talk about fintech, right? Basically, it means technology into the financial industry, right? To either make it more efficient and more personable for the consumers. Is that it? Fintech, what else does it represent?
This is Jan. I'll take that. I mean, I think that there's so many technologies available to people today, from chatbot, artificial intelligence, machine learning, crypto, blockchain, all of these things. People who experience those technologies, like Pratik, are asking why we do things the way we do them, and why we can't. Why is it so complicated? Why is it so hard? Why is it so difficult? And fintech is where these technology disruptors are looking at a traditional business like consumer banking, commercial banking, insurance, lending, and saying, why do we do it that way? Why is it so hard? Why is it so complicated? And are looking to apply new thinking, in many cases much more consumer oriented, high customer experience type thinking, that is breaking down barriers and technological legacy systems to apply better ways to do things.
Yes. So thank you, Jenna. So when you encompass all those industries, definitely the better customer experience does come into play. Is that the ultimate goal?
I think that we are living in a consumer-driven world. Even if you're a business, you're human beings, and all of us are expecting experiences that make sense. I think we used to, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it made sense to go to a bank branch and do things. You know, they used to have, I'm older than most of you, but they had bankers hours like 10 to 3 on Wednesdays. That's just totally unacceptable in today's world. I mean, in what world can email be available all the time? And so historically, companies told us how they would do business with us. And in today's world, consumers have the power, and they're demanding how they will do business with organizations. And if they don't find it where they've been historically, using services, they will change and go for something that makes sense to them, that is integrated, that's efficient, that's frictionless, and it's easy. And then God knows it's digital.
Very nice. Thank you. So, Mary, the next question is for you. So, and Jenna mentioned this already, but when people think of fintech, like everyday common people, they think of a startup that is going to get the big ones, right? They think of, oh, here are the startups coming to disrupt the industry. But, what does a typical fintech look like? And who are all in this fintech ecosystem?
Well, I think when consumers think about fintech, you're right. They're thinking about what applies to them. So things like PayPal, Venmo, Zelle. How it can make their lives easier and how they can transact in a more seamless and frictionless way. And it's comparable to things that they're used to in their regular lives, like purchasing on Amazon or using Netflix. I mean, everything's very seamless now. But I think it goes much more beyond that. And for a typical fintech, I think it boils down to creating efficiencies across, all areas of a financial institution or for the financial ecosystem. So you're also looking at back-end systems. You're looking at how to improve the day-to-day work for a typical banker. They're consumers as well. So, they're going home and making purchases on Amazon and using Netflix, and they also expect that same seamless experience on the back end when they're actually at the bank doing the work. So it's a lot of back and forth. It's definitely a consumer expectation now, and making sure that the experience is top notch, but also too making sure that there's efficiencies at the financial institution and within those fintechs just to make the whole process more seamless.
Okay, sounds good. So thank you, Mary. So Pratik, the next question is for you. So tell us, is this fintech industry static? And where have you seen the most disruption in the financial services so far? And I know you're going to talk from the perspective of the Eastern world, but we would love to hear if the fintech industry is static.
Yeah, sure. Fintech industry is always ever evolving. Like if you see the journey, it is always growing towards the Everest. Since the inception, like we saw the rise of Paytm, for an example, in India, or like Mary mentioned about PayPal and other companies. They are all keeping innovating and coming up with solutions which help the bottom of the pyramid. Like we have come up with a solution of name of wallet, which empowers or enables the existing banks and digital apps to empower their end users to transact seamlessly and safely without the need of internet. So this is going to serve the bottom of the pyramid. So fintech is not. I don't see any staticness in fintech industry, but it is always ever evolving.
Okay, very nice. So, Pratik, while you are at it, can you tell us how did you start your fintech journey?
Yeah, this is a small story. I When my co-founder Ms. Sangeeta was on her way to village in Odisha, say for an example, for her holidays in 2016, she faced a lot of dropouts in network. Forget about the data connectivity. For data connectivity, for even a 2G connection, she had to travel for 2 to 3 kilometers to another village just to stay connected. So by that, on that day, she decided and she discussed with me about this problem. Even in Bangalore, they faced these kind of situations. Even in tier 1, tier 2 cities, we face these kind of situations. Then we decided, why not come up with such solution when we have the resources. So then we tried to file a patent and we came up with this solution, which is going to serve.
Right. And we're going to talk about that product soon. But thank you, Pratik. That's an inspiring story. You just gave a story behind every entrepreneurial, backstory of why they became an entrepreneur, because they answered a question of why not, or why should it happen like this? What can I do? So thank you for reminding all of us as entrepreneurs that we all did ask that question and change the status quo. So thank you. Jenna, my next question is for you. Why are well-established financial institutions referred to as incumbents?
Hmm. I think it's just that legacy mindset. They've got the brand, they've got the history, they have the legacies that many of us that appeals to many of us, that we are used to it, and that we've got history going to the banks from childhood on. I mean, I remember stories of going to the bank with my mom. At 7 years old, I didn't really want to be a banker, but I knew I liked money. And so I was involved in like our finances. Truly, you can ask them to this. And they're incumbents because they've got trust of the people. At the same time, incumbency is a position that is sort of like being at the top, with the throne, with the crown on your head. Someone wants to take that throne off your head. And that's what we're seeing, these challenger organizations who are asking why people said, and as Pratik did, I love your story, Pratik, and how often to be incumbents too often are like any traditional organization. After a long time, it becomes about preservation of profit. That's a very natural thing for mature companies to experience. But you build a solution over time. You've got this sustaining innovation, and you have an incumbency position, and you want to retain that position, and you want to retain the profits people to expect from that. Whereas these challenger organizations are looking at how do they solve a unique problem, how do they disrupt something, and their goal is usually revenue growth as a measure versus profit. And so there's sort of this headbanging because the incumbent wants to preserve what it's built over time, the profits associated with that, and the dividends, and all the things that we come to expect as mature company stockholders. And the challenger organizations are looking at consumers and businesses and saying, how can we do this differently? And I'm not sure if you started off saying revenue growth is your goal, but I think that is the measure of consumer or demand for what you're saying, for your idea. Like, can you monetize it? Can you find someone who says, this is a problem worth paying for? And so these challenger banks start to nibble away either that sustaining innovation the incumbent has, or in a totally disruptive way, doing it differently. Like Mary just mentioned, Zelle, Harlan Park, one of our primary businesses forever has been checks. And something like Zelle and PayPal, those are disruptions to, they're not cheaper ways to do checks. They are completely different and disruptive technologies that enable payments to occur differently. And it's natural for a company to preserve what it's had, but we've also got to look at what do consumers demand and want once we become aware of how easy it is to make a Venmo transaction or something like that. And so understanding the roles of different organizations and how they can work together is very important.
Yes, so definitely. So Jenna, thank you so much for that. And I think like sort of the political system, like when I heard the word incumbent, oh my gosh, it's similar to the politics of the elections where you're fighting someone who's already in place.
Yeah.
And what are you bringing, right? So thank you for that. Mary, so let's talk about the US economy, right? So the continued economic expansion in the United States has really attracted capital and investment for the fintech sector, right? So do you think there's a shortage of innovation in the fintech industry? And I want you to also, along with this, address this question about how essential is it truly that all these parts of the fintech industries are actually communicating? I know you majored in communications. How important is it for the fintech industry, not just the startups, the regulators, the fintech enablers, the supporters, for them to be talking to each other to make it happen?
Yeah, well, it's critical, and not only talking amongst each other, but talking with these community financial institutions and banks and credit unions on how they can partner and effectively partner, because I think that's going to be critical. I think we're going to see a lot of expansion with that, and I think that I don't know that there's a shortage in it. I think we're going to continue to see innovation and continue to see folks trying to innovate within the industry and across the industry. But I think it's that partnering with fintechs that's really critical that is going to be imperative. And that goes into a lot of different areas. I mean, you're looking at regulatory issues there. Aware of the regulations within the financial space and adhering to that to help the financial institutions. And the financial institutions need that innovation. I mean, they simply can't be without it if they want to move forward. And it's especially critical for some of those smaller institutions to really be honing in on what fintechs make sense for them to partner with, because it's critical for them. They don't have the budgets for it to create it in-house. They don't have the manpower. So there definitely needs to be communication on both sides on what's needed from an industry perspective, what is the consumer demand, and how do we get there as an industry collectively and together.
Sure. So, go ahead, Jenna.
Dan Schulman, the CEO of PayPal, talked about the financial services industry really coming together as an ecosystem. And Mary, I think that makes so much sense. What you're just saying is that I think a lot of us historically have said, how can I put together something that makes me the winner? And in today's fintech world, with so many parts and pieces, I mean, you think about Plaid and Stripe and how they're more enabling components today. It is bringing together companies, ideas, services as an ecosystem, deliver on what consumers wanted. I think it's too difficult for any one company to try to go it alone. And I thought that made so much sense to me, that if we can think about it, that I have to win, but that we can win, we can really advance faster as a financial services industry, at least in the US.
Definitely. So, so I think there is some background noise. If each of us can go on mute when we're not talking, that'll be good, so the audience can hear us better. But Pratik, let us talk about the technology supporting the transformation, right, in the fintech world. So, what are the technologies that do support fintech?
See, from technology side, we can say blockchain. It is a revolutionizing technology. Then there is RegTech, and there are robo advisors. There are IoT devices, and These are all coming up with such solutions that are too much disruptive. And if I talk about robo advisors, even it is a very big technology, and with IoT devices there is a lot more to do. That is a very big industry going on, and in regtech space it is also a known technology, and blockchain is completely revolutionizing the fintech industry. Say for an example, Bitcoin, that is completely based on ledger based transactions in blockchain.
Right. So it's amazing how I think I heard about Bitcoin like 10 years ago during a Rotary presentation. And I was surprised, what are they talking about? Like, I have no idea. I don't know how coins get and money gets circulated up in the air. And for me to actually, and I'm sure for many more people to comprehend what is happening is a big deal where we have come to. But I know Pratik will be back on. He talked about the RegTech. He talked about the robo advisors, IoT, and blockchain technology. I want to ask all of you, how important is the growth of the blockchain technology? Starting with Mary. Mary, we're having a hard time hearing you.
There we go. I had turned it off. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So blockchain, that's an interesting one. I think we're going to see a lot of growth in that area. I read an article a couple of weeks ago that I think it's going to increase into the 300 to 400 billion range in terms of growth. So it's obviously going to be important. But I think, looking at Bitcoin and blockchain, I think what we're going to see really take off is just the cashless currency in general. Especially with what we've seen with this pandemic, a lot of folks are frankly afraid. Cash carries a lot of germs, so I'm seeing a lot of industries outside the financial space who are not allowing cash. They're not allowing checks. They're not even allowing credit cards and debit cards. They're requesting that you pay using alternative methods, which I think we're going to see that increase too, especially as we come out of this. But I think there's definitely growth that we're going to see in blockchain globally for sure.
Definitely. So we do see that eventually it's going to be revolutionary in the financial tech industry, Jenna, with the blockchain industry. But I'm sure it's going to take many, many, many years, for a common person to start, even to 10 years for most of us to start talking about this technology, the Bitcoins. So what are your thoughts? How important is it for the blockchain technology to grow?
I'll come at this more as a CEO than a technologist. I have a lot of companies that will come and pitch their idea to me. And when they start with something that says something like, I have a technology that, immediately I start to tune out because it's not about the technology, it's about the problem it solves. And I feel like we've been a little bit, again, forgive me if technologists out there, I feel like we've been a little bit entranced by the abilities of blockchain to, destructure things to individual units and the way it makes sense. It should do all of these great things for us, but I don't know yet that we've translated it completely into solving consumer problems. And I think that's really important that we start with the problem and what we're solving for. And the technology enables that. I was saying, I have a really great technology. What can it do? As a fintech, for those people out there who are in fintechs and are manage your companies, that's my advice. I would say, if you're coming to pitch to someone like me, tell me what problem you're solving and not advice to my company, but not this technology.
Sure. So basically, Jenna, what you're saying is, I think the consumer experience, that is what you're most bothered about when fintech companies are coming to pitch to you. You're not that much concerned at that time about the technology or what it does do, but you're concerned more about how is it going to help a common person who's going to use that technology.
We got to solve a problem. Even if the problem exists, I can solve a problem I didn't know I had. But you didn't start with the underlying technology of the iPhone. Steve Jobs started with the opportunity to make my life better. Yeah. And I think that is really what we have to make sure we don't get too clever in the technology, but really think about how Pratik's off wallet and the ability to move money offline. That's the problem it's solving. How he constructed that is less relevant to me as an investor.
Very nice, very well said, and it's good to hear from your side of the story who do take in the pitches. So thank you, Pratik. The question goes to you as well, and I'm sure you are biased in going to answer this. But how important is the growth of blockchain technology? You have to unmute, Pratik.
Yes.
Go ahead.
One important aspect which I would like to add Jenna's point. Mobile phones were in existence pre-iPhone. What changed the perspective after iPhone came? The experience. The experience completely matters. No matter what technology is being used, but the experience completely matters. See, in fintech industry, especially in the digital payment space, like we use cash to make any kind of payments or any kind of transaction, the same experience should be used, is expected by the consumers also. If it is a pay and click, the payment should be, the transaction should be completed in a single click or more or less in 2 clicks. And if it is being done completely offline, then it is going to be a big game changer in the fintech industry.
Yes, so that's great, Pratik. Thank you so much. And Mary, let me ask you this question: what fintech company have you actually been following this past year or the past 2 years? Basically, I'm asking which has been your favorite fintech industry, and if you had to award them, would you do that and why?
Gosh, that's a that's a hard question to ask. There's so many. My favorite. I guess one that I have been following is what's going on with Cabbage. I know there was some. They're going into the SBA PPP lending, and we're seeing a lot of that. So that's been interesting, and I'm curious to see how that's going to progress. For me, though, I think. And I had mentioned offline earlier about, some of the regulatory things going on, but Kasasa out of Austin has been very interesting to follow with their safecommunitybanking.com initiative, with the FDIC's recent proposed rule changes and how that's going to pan out for both fintechs and the community banking side. So I've been following that very closely since that's happening right now. And how that's going to change the landscape. So that's been interesting. It's less on the fintech side, but it's definitely going to impact fintechs. So that's been curious for me to watch over the last several months.
Nice, Jenna.
A couple that I like and Bill.com is one that just went public not that long ago. I think that they're really solving big problems for businesses, not unlike Cabbage, but more on the consumer banking side or the business banking side. Obviously, like Plaid being acquired by Visa is super fascinating, and they just launched the Plaid Exchange, I think, in the last week. What they can do to enable that ecosystem with APIs and this exchange, I think, is very interesting. And then I've been listening to the radio, and I hear like Varo and Chime and Robinhood and some of those organizations becoming a lot more mainstream, to hear these challenger banks or neobanks marketing themselves to the public the way they are, next to a Chase or a Bank of America or whatever it might be. Those are all very interesting to me, especially as like Varo got a bank charter. They're starting to move more into that space. N26 is another challenger bank that is very interesting to watch.
Very nice. So as we go to you, Pratik, the same question: which fintech company have you been following, or which is your favorite one? Maybe this is the time, and we don't want you to choose anything else other than yours, because I'm sure you're very confident about what you have to offer. Do you want to give a few seconds on what Off Wallet does? You have to hear you. Unmute. Yes.
Yeah, I'll come back to off wallet after this. Following the company, I just looked about the Robinhood's valuations. It has grown 6 times in a span of less than 3 to 4 years, I think.
Wow.
The valuation has gone to 6 times. I mean, in the initial stages, it was around $130 million, and it is now $8.3 billion. So that's a very big number. And coming to off wallet is a very multifaceted technology. It is not only going to help in the fintech industry, it can also be used in healthcare, I mean in emergency response services, for transportations, for logistics. Especially in the healthcare domain, I can guarantee it is going to revolutionize the whole system, because post this pandemic, all the governments are going to be very much keen to form a very robust health for their citizens. And here comes off wallet as a bridge, which is going to bridge the digital divide. Since we can see, like in India, in my country, Arogya Setu is being promoted by our governments. But basically, Arogya Setu can run on these smartphones and Android based phones. But what about those feature phones, or say, or to those people who are not connected to the internet? How are they going to be bridged?
So that's when off wallet comes, where you don't need a Wi-Fi or a mobile an internet connection to actually do the cash transaction. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah.
Very nice. And we wish you only success more and more. And I do have a funny thing that I wanted to state, which I was going to state later when we talk about governments. So usually when someone says the government is coming after me, it's not a good thing, right? But when Pratik says it, it's good because the government, and he mentioned this recently this week, that the government is after him for his product. So we
Yeah,
wish
I
you.
cannot. I cannot take that name.
Okay, so we won't take that name, but they are definitely after him for the intended purpose. So thank you, Pratik, for that. So Jenna and Mary or Pratik, the question that I have for you is, what are some of the critical milestones that the fintech industry has reached? And I never thought I'll say this. Alternative finance. I've always talked about alternative medicine, having my medical background, but why is this hype for alternative finance, Mary?
Um, hmm. I think so. Your original question is what are the critical milestones? I think fintech kind of came about during the Great Recession, largely, and I think we've seen a lot of transitions and a lot of changes from that from the start. It started out as a consumer need. A lot of people were not happy with the current ways that they were transacting and working with financial institutions, and so fintechs came about. And then we've seen partnerships and how the financial industry can partner, like I mentioned earlier, to really innovate the space and to make greater efficiencies. And so I think we've seen a tremendous change in how we are banking. Digital obviously has completely morphed. Mobile banking didn't exist, 15 years ago, really. So that's completely changed the way that folks are interacting with their financial institutions and how they're handling their money. That's going to grow substantially, especially after this pandemic. Folks have been forced into it, and it's probably a good thing. It's forced the financial industry to really embrace digital and move the needle even further. So we've made a lot of great strides towards it. I think we're going to see it just really, really take off over the next 12 months to the next couple of years.
Very nice. And Mary, you are a millennial, and I'm sure you are after the alternative finance that's going to be more consumer experience, making sure you have a good consumer experience. So I remember probably 7 to 8 years ago when I was able to deposit my check through my mobile phone, and I will not forget that screech of happiness I don't like to go to the bank, and that's the truth, right? And so here's this bank that has given me an opportunity. You don't even need to come see us, just deposit it online. And we do have a banker, owner of a banker who is watching us now. And, I wish him all the best. And I was telling him about how it's a community bank and how they should go mobile and how he's going to attract more customers like me who don't want to visit the physical brick and mortar bank. So, Jenna, coming to that, I think it's the current situation as well. Why is there a hype for alternative finance?
Well, I think we talked about who are underbanked or alternatively banked. Quite honestly, that's the mass market today. So us solving for baby boomers and Gen X like us is really solving for the smaller percentage of people. Today, people want to, what was alternative finance or alternative banking is now mainstream banking. And making sure that we understand that. And for community banks, like you were saying, it can be very difficult to fully embrace because of regulation, but also because of legacy core systems, which make it very difficult to fully utilize these alternative or mass demand ways of banking today. And I think as you think about the fintech space and where we are, and Mary mentioned, touchless payment, contactless payments, and other things that are now maybe in an early stage, how much growth is at this point and become more mainstream, and what does that mean to the way fintech companies have thought about their business models and how they make money. And for example, I think interchange income with debit cards and credit cards is being really impacted right now. Does that sustain itself? Does it change? I don't know. But I think I expect fintech largely. We understand we have to think more about consumers and the way they want as human beings to bank, and also businesses like Cabbage and other things. At the same time, there's so many. I feel like understanding how they add value in the value chain and how they make money is going to start to drive consolidation.
Right.
A lot of the techs, the bigger ones, look at what makes sense in terms of consolidation and where they play into a strategic organization. And then I also, at the same time, we all have to acknowledge during this pandemic, it's all about cash, right? And cash flow and your burn rate. And for fintechs, larger fintechs, they may have been well capitalized and had a great cash flow that is slowing or stopped, and their burn rate may not be able to be turned off as effectively as maybe a very small startup that doesn't have, their early stage and they are not burning cash at the same rate. So I think all of this is going to start to lead to consolidation, and I don't think you're going to see a lot of IPOs right now or anytime soon. And we're going to have to start to rationalize this very, very busy space in fintech.
Very nice. So while Pratik comes back to us, are there any driving force behind fintech? Mary, I know we've talked about it, but I just wanted to make sure we go to the next topic. But are there any driving force? Is there a driving force that's driving fintechs?
Well, I guess it depends on what sectors you're looking at. I think we've talked a lot about digital, but that's an obvious one. We're certainly going to see more growth there. Some of the less talked about areas that I think we may see some traction in moving forward are things around treasury management services. So you have all these banks that had these PPP loans that they're giving out to these small businesses. Which was a challenge and continues to be a challenge. The forgiveness part is going to continue to be a challenge, and we've seen a lot of companies pop up, and they've been very nimble and quick to create solutions to help with that part. That hasn't even happened yet. We're a few weeks out from that, but I imagine that's going to be a challenge. But the other part is I was talking to a board member for a small community bank, and they mentioned to me that 30 to 40% of their PPP loans went out to non-existing customers, so new small businesses that they were not working with prior to that. So what that tells me is that there's going to be a huge opportunity after for them to start talking to them about additional types of solutions and services that they can provide to help them with their businesses, which is probably going to be needed. We're getting hit pretty hard from this whole pandemic. So there's a huge opportunity there. And for fintechs, what that means is that there's an opportunity to help with leveraging artificial intelligence, behavioral science, to help with those discussions. The average banker can't really have a conversation with a small business about their financial needs or the accounting software that they might need. So there's a huge opportunity there to leverage technology and innovation to help with those conversations at the bank or online. I hate to use the word cross-sell. It's a kind of a negative word in the space, but to really help them understand what services are needed and what solutions will help move the needle for their particular business. So I see that as a huge opportunity moving forward.
And definitely to those, the 14 million unbanked residents, right, who the PPP loans were not able to be delivered via the bank. So definitely that's a huge population. But getting back to this, getting this to the part where we talk about the government and the challenges and the policies in the fintech industry, right? How do they all intersect? So Jenna and Prateek, do you think, when I'm saying United States government, I'm sure I'm talking about your own government as well, Prateek, is United States less inviting for certain fintech businesses and investments compared with the countries in Asia or Europe? And I want Jenna to answer and then Prateek.
I think less inviting and more inviting. So on the less inviting, it is an extremely complex financial structure here with state charters, federal charters. Most countries have federal laws, and they not all these different state banking regulations, and it's extremely complex here, which is why we have something like 8,000 or 9,000 financial institutions instead of 5 or 6. On the other hand, I think to Mary's point about what's fueling fintech, I think that we've had the traditional banks, and then we've had this separate world of like check cashers, payday lenders, title insurance, all these other financial providers that were solving needs of people that the traditional bank didn't solve. And some of the reasons they don't solve for is regulation. But fintechs can start to bridge that gap. Like there's a company in Atlanta here where we live called Ingo, INGO. And one of the things they do is they have a software algorithm that helps to predict your ability to pay. So if you deposit a check, how likely is that check to be good? So they can make those funds available faster. So instead of going to a payday lender with my check and giving some amount of that money away just to get cash, Ingo is going to banks directly and offering that service. So for $4.95 or something like that, a bank can make those funds available immediately. And so I think that fintech can help bridge this market where people feel, the biggest group of people who go to check cashers are teachers. And so this is a group that could be served well by financial institutions traditionally, but the regulations don't make it easy to do that. And fintech, I think, can be a bridge to that.
Very nice. Thank you for the answer, Jenna. Prateek, is your government, are there any challenges that's faced by the fintechs, and how is government promoting fintechs in India?
Presently in India, for the fintechs from government side, if I say, if we see the present government which is at the center, our Honorable Prime Minister's vision is a cashless economy. He started it with a digital India, and then he has left no stone unturned to come up things like USSD, UPI, Beam, and Rupee, and he's still coming up with such solutions, and he keeps new entrepreneurs and startups encouraging to come up with new solutions. If we see the websites of Startup India and Startup Odisha, there are numerous of hackathons being floated by the government agencies. They are only encouraging them to come up with newer solutions. And in the fintech space, still there are numerous startups coming up with disruptive solutions, and this is going to be a big change.
Okay, very nice. Thank you for that. And Pratik, if I must let the audience know that this is your first time getting on to the webinar and you've been
Yeah,
doing good so well, and we continue to do, we wish you the best to continue to do well and much more. So, Mary, let's talk about regulations and regulators, right? Ultimately, what the regulators want is a safe and balanced way. And so why should fintech industry get that special promotion of not going through the 18 to 24 months of the license process or the process that we have to go into becoming a bank, right? So that is one argument. But then an entrepreneur in the technology world is not willing to spend that 18 months to 24 months, and this passion dies out. By creating that team, everybody's just waiting. So our question is, do you think our government bodies or regulators provide any support for the financial innovation?
Um, they do. I think they want innovation. Obviously, I mean it's in everyone's best interest. So I don't think they're trying to not encourage it or to make it difficult. I think it's like Jenna said, it's a very complicated system. So it's we have state, we have federal. It's just pretty much all over the place. I think though that for fintechs to survive and to do well, though they do need to make sure that they are compliant, regardless of if it's required at this point. Especially if they're partnering with financial institutions, they need to make sure that they are checking all boxes on that, because it makes it easier for the financial institutions on the back end with partnering with certain companies. At some point, they probably will be regulated more closely. That hasn't happened just yet, but I suspect that will continue to happen. And so, my recommendation for any fintech is to get ahead of the curve on that, not just for their current business, but the future. They'll probably be taking a look at a little bit more closely.
Sure. So I know the fintech sandbox already exists in UK, in the European area, where the government is providing this safe space for the innovators to come in and test their theory and work it out in real time. And I believe Arizona is the first state that has actually launched the fintech sandbox in 2018, and Utah following. And there are several other states that don't have a fintech sandbox, but they're loosening their laws and license part in helping innovators get licensed, and listening to them. So my question to Jenna is it right to say not to ignore the vital importance of regulation?
Not to ignore the vital importance of regulation.
Regulation, yes.
Oh, it can't be your first thought because that would kill your innovation right there, right? This complex world is in the US. I mean, if you start to get the hurdles of innovating here, it's a daunting thing. And it's why incumbents have a strong position because, we got the opportunity figured out over hundreds of years instead of right now. But I think it's very important that you contemplate that in a way. And I love Phoenix or Arizona and Utah, what they're doing. It they're creating a safe place for companies to incubate their ideas and to understand the unmet need they're solving for before they have to start thinking about how do I do this, where Texas laws are different from Montana, different from the federal charters, all of that. I think you can't ignore it, but you have to be prepared for it. And whether it's on your advisory board, or having someone that's got an eye towards that, like, are you going to come into direct conflict with regulations as you're building your solution? How would you think about that? And or how do you partner or use an ecosystem to embed it into something that has already been deemed regulatorily sound? So it's got to be a part of that process, but I wouldn't let it be too early stage because I think it would be a killer of innovation. And I feel like we've got to push on regulations too. Like I said, regulators need to consider alternative finance methods that suit the consumer better. So fintech helps.
Sure. Thanks.
Turn off the wood.
Thank you. What you're saying, Jenna, is regulation is important, but maybe that should not be the first thought that should come to the innovators, because it could probably sometimes discourage them from moving forward. And probably, I'm sure there is help available for those innovators to get the regulatory help that they need to move forward. Sounds good. Thank you. So let's go to the unavoidable topic, COVID-19 crisis. And we saw the burden and the strain that it put on financial institutions, especially the big banks. Obviously, it looks like there are going to be winners and losers in the both fintech industry terms and in the brick and mortar bank industries, right? So my question is, which fintech firms, Prateek, are best positioned for the future of post COVID-19? And I would want Mary to answer the rest based on US. Prateek, which fintech term is best positioned for the future post COVID-19?
Which fintech? Sorry, I
Firms
didn't
are
get the
best
question.
positioned, like which fintech firms will survive through this crisis, post the COVID-19 crisis?
Like I said in the beginning, this is the time to mend your nets. The one who are coming up with newer technologies and who are already existing but are still innovating and coming up with newer technologies are going to are going to keep the momentum, maintain the momentum, and they are going to certainly win this race.
Definitely. Thank you. So innovation, continue, don't give up. Thanks. Mary,
Yeah.
how about you?
Yeah, I completely agree with Pratik on that. I think it boils down to what fintechs are nimble, which fintechs can move the quickest in terms of creating technology to fit what it is we need right now, what the consumers need right now, what these financial institutions need right now. I mentioned a while ago about the PPP lending. That's an area that there wasn't existing technology for that, and so the ones that are going to win out at the end of this are the ones that can innovate very quickly and get up to speed very fast, and get those solutions out there to the marketplace the fastest.
Very nice. So, Jenna, should bankers be worried about the fintech industry, or should they be worried about the government?
Oh. I think that banks were for a long time thinking the fintechs were like these ankle biters, and then maybe got worried, and now they're starting to embrace them. And so I would not say worried anymore. I think it would be foolish for us not to understand that there are better ways of doing things. And I think fintech actually offers banks an opportunity to do things that they have maybe been unable to do because the core systems have not, they've had such a stranglehold on the organization, on how legacy banks have been run. And fintech is pushing on that really hard. And I think that provides a really great answer for a lot of community banks, credit unions, and even large banks to move faster and to be more responsive to consumer and business needs. So I wouldn't be afraid of that. Government regulation, I think in the US, we've got a fairly friendly environment today in our current administration that is done a lot in terms of deregulation, in terms of the CFPB board. The Consumer Banking Association, run by Richard Hunt, has done a lot of great work. The credit unions are making advancements. So I don't think regulation today is as cumbersome, or maybe new regulation is not as cumbersome as it was not that long ago. And I think that there's room right now for fintech and the banks and insurance providers, whatever, and government to all coexist and to recognize the United States has to move faster.
Very, very well said, Jenna. So what you're basically saying is, with the right talent and the right environment, though the competitions might exist, I think through collaborative opportunities, there is an opportunity for a bank to collaborate with the fintech and help each other survive and expand further, better than just getting into the competitive field.
Yes.
Very nice. So let's talk about quickly before the last question, probably before we get to the comments, the Q&A from the audience is the investor confidence. So I want to understand the investor confidence in your area, Prateek. How much are you hearing back from investors, especially during this time? Because entrepreneurs and the product cannot go out there without money, right? So how do you feel confident, or do you feel we just have to wait out the COVID-19?
Yeah, money is the blood for entrepreneurs, especially. And during this COVID-19, what we experienced is we are getting response from the investors, and they are quite excited to hear about the solution and the innovativeness and its disruptiveness. But there is also a certain group which is kind of promoting that yes, investments would not be made or will be made. Investors would be sitting tight on that. It is not so. We are getting good calls and we are taking them, and let us see what happens.
Very nice. Mary or Jenna, do you want to chime in on that before we go to the final question, before we move to the audience questions?
Like I said, I just think that for investors, that people are going to be looking at what are the monetization models. How do you get paid in a world that I think is very different? And so I don't know that the money is not there, although I do think there is a reticence in the capital markets today. But I would say that funding is there, but the monetization models are going to be really important. And if it is dependent on things that are really changing in today's economic environment, you may see cash a lot harder to come by.
Okay, sounds good. So, Mary, the future, right? What do you see for the fintech industry in the coming 12 months? And obviously, we've noticed, and we know this for sure, that small businesses are the heartthrob of America. And of course, we don't want to discourage the entrepreneurs as they keep coming into this field. But what do you see in the next 12 months for the fintech industry?
Well, and I think this may be an obvious one, but and it's been talked about quite a bit in the last few weeks and few months. But digital obviously is going to continue to increase. I think probably what we'll see is we'll see a pretty rapid increase in the projections. I think there were a lot of previous predictions that there was certain growth. I think that's going to speed up very, very quickly. Online account opening has increased, more so just out of necessity. You can't visit a physical branch, so there's going to be an uptick in those kinds of technologies, and making sure that there's a way for folks to transact and bank beyond more than just logging into their bank account and checking their account status. They need to be able to do much more than that, and I think we're going to see an uptick in that globally too. I think I read an article that there was a report that came out that there's been a 72% increase in financial apps, the usage of it. So that's gonna take hold. And I think just coming out of this whole pandemic, it's certainly maybe not changed the way that we're doing things, but it's certainly pushed it forward very, very quickly. And I think we're going to continue to see that.
Sure. So, Jenna, let's get to you this question from the audience. Due to pandemic, and since we finished the last sentence with the pandemic, and so the question is, due to pandemic, we are not able to visit bank. How can non-profit organizations transfer funds to non-profit organization? Now it's formed individual to individual basis, not from institute to institute. So I'm sure Prateek's off-wallet would help here, but unfortunately we don't have the off-wallet technology yet. Here might be we do, but we don't. But Jenna, tell us realistically an answer to a question.
I'm so sorry.
So the question is, due to pandemic, we are not able to transfer or make transactions from non-profit organization to another non-profit. So is it going to be more individual to individual transaction than institute to institute?
Yeah, peer-to-peer payments like Zelle and those are much more. That whole charitable donation thing has not been really disrupted yet, because you have to have the foundation ID, the tax ID, all of those kinds of things. It's not easy to do or some kind of financial institution to financial institution payments. So I don't have the answer to that. I've had a lot of questions about that. But to the points that have been made, I think the pandemic, like that's an unmet need right there, right? And so we're all regrouping and all thinking about the world and what it's going to look like. And I feel like we're going to have an explosion of innovation, an explosion of ideas where we are home with our families and we're really examining our lives. We spend so much time in traffic and just doing stuff. This is an opportunity for us to look around and observe and to say, why do we do it that way? I feel so positive about innovation and that we're all going to see a problem just like that one that has not been solved. And I've been asked about it for 5 years. Let's solve it. Let's find a way to finally get to some of these things as a result of the mending of our nets that Pratik talked about. We've got an opportunity.
Sure. So Pratik, this question is for you probably. One of the headaches of international travel as well as trade is currency exchange. How do you see fintech impacting global purchases?
Sorry.
So how do you see fintech impacting global purchases? Because there's been limitation in trade and exchange, currency exchange. So do you see the fintech industry coming forward to meet that unmet need?
Yeah, the way these fintech companies are coming up with solutions, there is no space left for these foreign trade exchanges or these domestic transfers or international transfers to be made. This is going to be a very good thing.
Okay, and
yeah, you see a lot of fintech companies like Wirecard and N26, and they're moving money across the world now. They're solving for all the exchange and all of that. I think that is absolutely something being addressed by fintech.
Sure. So we're going to take one final question, and we're going to thank the panelists. The final question from the audience is: with foot traffic dwindling to all the brick and mortar stores, how is fintech able to estimate capacity for handling increase in online transactions? And we've seen Shipt and Instacart, but are they able to handle the capacity? Mary?
That's a tough one. I think foot traffic is definitely down. I'm curious to see what's going to happen after everyone's kind of released from their homes. I think people certainly want to do more transactions online and through mobile, and it's more convenient for them. But there's still a lot of folks who want to actually go into the branch and talk to a human being. And I don't think that's ever going to go away, and across any generation. You've got, millennials and the younger ones coming up behind them. They want to talk to a physical person when it comes to their their finances and what they need to be doing with their finances. So I don't know that, I think foot traffic will definitely go down in terms of estimating that and figuring out what makes sense for a financial institution if they need to decrease that. I'd love to see some kind of innovation to help with figuring that out. We have solutions in place right now to figure out how much cash a branch needs to hold based on transactions and what they're seeing. So I imagine it may be something similar to that. But I look forward to seeing that kind of technology.
Very nice. So thank you again so much, Mary, Jenna, Pratik. It has been wonderful talking to you. While I learned a lot the past days on fintech, I think you've educated me further. And hopefully the audience have learned a lot on fintech. And I think the theme that we've come out is, again, entrepreneurs should not give up. And I think those entrepreneurs who are able to strive through this COVID-19 and build up and meet the opportunities and the challenges that exist there, either through collaborating with their local community banks and getting help for the government sector to get through the regulatory process, be patient. And we don't have all the answers, but definitely there seems to be opportunities that the entrepreneurs can strive on. So thank you again for joining us. Visit our website, vendorship.net, for future webinars, and we look forward to seeing you soon for our next webinar. Thank you so much again, all of you. Have a safe one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.